What is up, and welcome back to Week 10 of J&T Fantasy Insiders. I'm your host, Tyler Marshall, with my co-host, Jake Moriarty, and we are heading into Week 10 of the NFL season. Let's go over Week 9. Our picks were really meh. We had some picks that hit. Some of them were pretty bad, but otherwise, we had a decent week. Joe Mixon had an outstanding performance. Hopefully you didn't play him, and hopefully you had him. Devontae Adams did great. A lot of players with great weeks. Hopefully we can get the same exact fantasy production in Week 10. So without further ado, let's head right into it.
So here we go, starting off the predictions with our first must-start, and we have Deontay Johnson this week. Johnson's versus the Saints, which are all right, but they give up a lot of flat routes, which is exactly what Johnson does. So I think he'll have a lot of targets and a lot of catches this game, maybe even a touchdown. Who knows? He's our first must-start.
For our second must-start, we have Joshua Palmer. With Keenan Allen and Mike Williams inactive again this week, we expect Josh Palmer to have the majority of targets on this limited Chargers roster. Last week, putting up an impressive 8 receptions for 106 yards and also getting 10 targets. Expect the same target share this week.
All right, now I know I look different. But now for our third must-start of the week, it's Brandon Aiyuk. Aiyuk is versus a banged-up Chargers secondary who tend to give up a lot of points to receivers, and Devo's just coming back, so he's not going to have the biggest week. Aiyuk will still be the wide receiver one, I believe, with Devo coming back from injuries. And, yeah, I think he'll have a pretty good game on Sunday night.
Let's get into the must-sits. For our first must-sit, we have Adam Thielen. With a tough matchup against a great Bills secondary, expect him to get a low volume, especially with the new addition of TJ Hockenson, who had a very good game, getting a majority of targets and receptions, and having an outstanding game for a tight end. I do not like Adam Thielen this week. He's just not getting enough targets or enough looks to be a startable fantasy wide receiver.
Now for our second must-sit of the week, we have George Pickens. Now this is basically the opposite reason of Deontay Johnson. The Saints have a good secondary, so George Pickens is a great player, but he gets a lot of deep balls, which I don't think will happen against a good Saints defense. So yeah, he's a must-sit this week.
For our third must-sit, we have Terry McLaurin. Going against a great Eagles secondary, I expect Terry McLaurin to have a very bad week. Majority, he's going to be guarded by Darius Slay, who has clamped up all the people he's versed, including Justin Jefferson, who is so good, as we all know. Also, with the addition of rookie wide receiver Jahan Dotson, there are plenty of weapons now in this offense, and I don't expect McLaurin to get the same amount of volume as he did weeks with Dotson not in.
Now for a new thing, we're doing waiver wires this week, and our first waiver wire is Donovan Peoples-Jones. Deshaun Watson's coming back in a couple weeks, and Peoples-Jones has been great and is the wide receiver too, and he's owned in less than 20% of leagues. So go get him now if you can. He's gonna have a great fantasy playoffs.
So for our second waiver wire pickup, we think you should pick up Greg Dulcich. Having over 10 points in his last 3 games, he's a formidable starting fantasy tight end. With the easy rest of the season matchups for him, you should definitely pick this guy up who could be a sneaky pick if you need a tight end, and you should definitely start him in the playoffs if you need one.
Now, our final waiver wire for this week is Jarvis Landry. Similar reasons to Peoples-Jones, actually, because Watson's coming back, and not Watson. Jameis is coming back, and when Jameis played in week 1, Landry had 18 points. So, and with Michael Thomas out for the rest of the season, it's just him and Olave. So yeah, I think Landry will have a pretty good rest of the season.
Let's get into the boomer bust. So for our first boomer bust, we have CeeDee Lamb, and he is going to bust against the Green Bay Packers. With a hard matchup against Jair Alexander, I doubt that CeeDee Lamb will be able to have a very impactful game. Seeing less targets now with Dak Prescott back, it will be especially harder for him to get even more this game with a top-tier, top 2 cornerback in Jair Alexander.
Now for our second boom and bust, we have Jonathan Taylor, and I believe he will boom this week. Now I know Taylor, he had a great week 1 and has been a terrible player. Not terrible, but has not lived up to the hype. at all the rest of the season. So this week against the Raiders, who haven't been great against the run, I think he'll boom. I think he'll finally pop off and show why he was a number one pick.
For our third boomer bust, we have Raheem Mostert, who's a must-start last week, but we think he will bust against the Cleveland Browns. With the addition of Jeff Wilson proving to be great for the Miami Dolphins, expect Mostert to get less usage. With both running backs getting equal carries last week and Wilson getting more targets in the receiving downs, Mostert will prove to not have an impact in this game.
Our top quarterback this week is Patrick Mahomes. He's versing the Jaguars, who are not a great defense, obviously, not a great team, and Mahomes is just going to eat up. He's the number one quarterback. Josh Allen banged up, and other quarterbacks not having great matchups. So yeah, I think Mahomes will easily be the QB1 this week.
For our number 2 ranked QB, we have Justin Fields. Against a horrible defense in the Lions and just coming off the best game of his career, we are officially riding the Fields train. With tons of rushing upside, expect a big fantasy total from him with 27 plus fantasy points this week.
Now, our third quarterback is someone playing in the Germany game, which is Tom Brady. Tom Brady, he's again, not a lot of good quarterbacks this week in my opinion. And I think Brady, he always does well against some defenses that aren't great, even though Seattle's been all right this week. But I think Brady's going to tear up and have at least 2 touchdowns.
So moving on to our top 3 running backs. So let's start off with the first ranked running back. We have Saquon Barkley. He's going against the worst run defense in the NFL of the Houston Texans, who give up so much yardage to running backs. And with such a talented running back like Saquon Barkley, expect him to go crazy. We expect 33 plus fantasy points. Make sure you do start Barkley if you weren't already. He's going to go off.
Our RB2 this week is CMC. CMC is playing the Chargers, and last week he played. They had a bye last week. Last week they played, so 2 weeks ago he had the Triple Crown, which not done a lot. So I think the Chargers are banged up. No Joey Bosa, no J.C. Jackson. So I think another good week for CMC.
For our third ranked running back, we have Travis Etienne. Going against a bad run defense in the Chiefs, who are ranked in the low 20s, expect Etienne to keep on his dominant stance ever since he's became the main starter for the Jaguars, and expect 25 plus from Etienne.
Our wide receiver 1 so far is the fantasy MVP this year, Tyreek Hill. He's having a great season, and now he's versing Cleveland secondary, which isn't amazing. Even though they get Denzel Ward back, I still think Hill's going to eat up and have another 25 plus week.
For our second ranked wide receiver, we have Stephon Diggs. Going against his former team that traded him, and the Vikings have the 27th worst defense towards fantasy wide receivers. Expect a huge game from Stephon Diggs, no matter if Josh Allen's the starter or Case Keenum. Both of those QBs have chemistry with Diggs, and I expect 28 plus fantasy points from him.
Our wide receiver 3 this week is A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown has been dominating this year with Jalen Hurts, and they're versing Washington, who gave 34 to Devonta Smith last time. So Washington will probably try to eliminate Smith, which leaves Brown in one-on-one coverage. So he's going to have another monster week.
Now moving on to our top tight ends. Our first ranked tight end is obviously Travis Kelce. Not surprising here, but Travis Kelce is the most dominant fantasy tight end in the league. Even though he has a tough fantasy matchup, I still expect 17 plus from Travis Kelce this week.
Our tight end 2 this week is Tyler Higbee. Higbee is playing Arizona, who actually does well against Cooper Kupp, so he eliminates Kupp, so it's really Higbee and Robinson. I know Matthew Stafford isn't playing, but usually backup quarterbacks tend to go to their tight ends actually a decent amount because it's like safety blanket. So I think Higbee will have a lot of catches and targets this week.
For our third fantasy tight end, we have Pat Freiermuth. With the hardest matchup against fantasy tight ends this week, we still expect Freiermuth to have a great game. He's back from the bye, and since Pickett, he's had a bunch of targets, and we expect a big game. We expect 15 plus points from the Steelers tight end.